Oh yana hey ya we hey ya hey ya. Oh yana hey ya we hey ya hey ya.
My name is Terry-Lynn Brant. I am Diggity Hogan Mohawk Turtle Clan from Six Nations. I live in Oswego here. Um, I'm what you call a seed keeper, or carrier of seeds. My previous career, I spent in the classroom for 35 years. Happy to be free now and just teaching and doing what I like to do. So for the last 4 years or so now, a couple years previous to that, before I retired, I started to figure out what am I going to be doing in my retirement. And one of the things I did notice in the last 10 years or so, I had more and more people approaching me and asking me different things about agriculture. And then it finally dawned on me after I kind of said, okay, well, I'm having a little bit of gardening club at my house, and it started to dawn on me when I got to have about 37 people that this is kind of getting beyond my house. So, and realizing that the majority of the people were, I would say, late 20s to mid 30s in the group, right? So they were younger people, and that's when it hit me that the Six Nations is in a very critical state in terms of agriculture, right? And it's something that we really have to pay attention to as a people, as a nation, and as a world, right? Not just us here on Six Nations, but out there in the greater part of the territories and in Canada, around the world. The family farm is gone, and no longer are the children brought up and to know and understand what kind of foods our people eat, how they grow them, and how they prepare them and keep them. I've been fortunate enough to have ancestors that were agriculturalists, and really fortunate enough to have ancestors that were able to have the seed of our ancestors brought over to us from the Mohawk Valley. You know, my family's last place was around Ganajohalegi, was the last place where our people lived, which is, they would call it Kanajahari. So we lived around there, and coming over here, we were able to bring our seed with us, and it stayed in our family. So our family was able to maintain several lines of our bean and corn and tobacco and things like that we've had them since we've been here. And you don't really recognize the fact that how much of a national treasure it is until you turn around and you realize, hey, there isn't any families that can say that anymore. You know, it's that because they've gotten lost and muted, unfortunately. So I started paying heed to that, because my uncle, he was really instrumental in my life and helping me understand the importance of agriculture. So it wasn't my father. He was a really good, he was the one that cracked the whip. And as a kid, like, get in there, do some agriculture. I had, 8 brothers and sisters, and the thing is, anybody with large families back in the day, everybody had a garden, everybody contributed in some way. My brothers and sisters, after what we had to do was done, they all, went off and did whatever. I was the kid that stayed there in the garden, that kept, I enjoyed it, I always did. So as I continued in that path, I began to understand that, agriculture, growing, gardening is my gift that the Creator gave to me. He said, "This is the thing you're good at." So I never ever left the garden. I raised all my children. They all know, what we need to know about gardening. They all, have the seeds of our people. They know how to preserve them, old methods and the newer modern, like canning and stuff like that, like the modern stuff. So it's really important that we share those and pass them on with our people. And one of the big things with me is, as a gardener, I really look at what I'm growing, but I'm just thinking right now in this time of COVID, because it's a really important time for us. And this year, because of COVID, normally I have a website, and I'll sell some of my seeds on that website, just because it's starting to cost me a small fortune. Like, it costs like $13 American to send 2 little bags of seeds down to Florida. So I made a website so that people, we have a lot of our Mohawk people are all over the place, right? They're, not just here on Six Nations. My cousin calls me from Washington. Hey, can you send me some corn? I want to make corn soup. So he goes and he makes his corn soup. I send him out. Next summer he goes, can you send me some seed? I want to grow corn. I says, you didn't say? No, we ate it all. So I said, well, next time, So it's just like our people are everywhere. So, they got to get access, and, basically the mail's the only way. And so that's kind of how I got into that path, because I had so many requests for seeds, not just from our own families, our own community, but from all the other territories as well. So like even this time in the COVID time, all of a sudden people said, oh my God, there's going to be shortages. We're not going to have anything to eat. And everybody's panicking and buying up all this stuff and, hoarding and, getting all haired up and all excited about it. And I caution people in that sense to, because when you think about and talk about food security, when you're an agriculturalist like me, it means it's a little bit different, because when people say, I got to have good food, I want my, yeah, that's important there, but suddenly when you're in a crisis, right away you're thinking about me. What do I need in my belly? What's important for me? Well, I want to get some of that in my own stuff. That's important. But so you're putting yourself above everything. So that's what I want to caution our growers and all people that are into agriculture and stuff, is that never put yourself there, right? This becomes the gift or the bounty, and that's important. But what's more important to people in agriculture, especially from a Haudenosaunee perspective, is not what you produce, it's how you produce. And more importantly, is the relationship that you have with the earth itself. If you don't leave the earth better than you found it, then you're not a good one. You haven't done your job. You're not a Mohawk. Right? These Mohawks leave the ground better, the earth better than when we found it. So as an agriculturalist, if that earth is not better, when you leave, when you die, you're gone, and somebody else inherits your garden. If it's not in that state, then you really haven't done your job, right? I guess that's how, when I'm thinking about these people on this too, I was thinking about them, what the heck do I say to these people? And I guess that's almost one of the cautions. I work here in my garden every day, about 9 hours a day. Here in the garden, my property, developing our agricultural school we have here, the resource place. But, good 9 hours a day, 6 days a week. And I think about that, and I think, so that's kind of in the summertime, but in the wintertime, I'm doing a lot of other things. But all across the time, I'm always doing this. I have this little element of activism in me, and I've always had that spirit to, like, hey, this is not right, so to stand up and I tied myself to a tree because I thought, this cannot happen, right? So you do those things, right? And we think about that. And then I got thinking, okay, well, what does that mean to a paddler, right? Because I'm very tied to the land, right? And I know what I go through. And if I plant 15 squash and I only get one squash, even though I got 15 plants, I'm very happy because the earth was able to produce it. I created in such a place that, maybe next year I'll get 2 squash out of the 15. So it's not the bounty that's important, right? It's the fact that I'm working that soil, I'm encouraging it, I'm making it better, I'm trying to do that. So when that person's sitting there in that canoe on that river, my first question is, what did you do for the river? What did you do to make it better? Is it better now, after you're gone and dead, or you're done your paddling career? Is it now better? And if it's not better, then you haven't fulfilled your responsibility as a canoer, right? If that water is important and you do that thing, or whatever it is, mine's in gardening, so that earth is so important in that relationship with all the things that are, same thing with that paddler. If that water is really important and you enjoy that activity, if you were a mountain climber in that mountain, or that if you were a hiker, all those things that we do and we take enjoyment from, if we don't spend an equal amount of time as we do on the water as we do protecting that water, then we haven't done our job. We haven't been very respectful to the sport or the whole thing. And that's, kind of the way I think. It's, to me, that's the big thing. That's the big picture, and at the end of the day, what we as humans have to do, we have to stop and think about, how are we treating the earth? What's the relationship? And do I want my grandchildren to do it? and they're not going to do it as well, right? Now we have in some areas big messes, but we're never going to get better if we don't stop and start figuring out how to fix them, right? So every little thing that we do when we go on that river, what's that canoe made out of? Did it pollute? Did it add pollution to the water? Or didn't? Did you buy from a responsible company or not? Or you just buy because the one was on sale and you like the color, So even in those simple things, we should be a conscientious citizen and be thinking of that so that we can continue. So that was kind of like the thing I thought that was the same about what I do and what a canoer would do on the river. And in both of those things, right, that two-word symbol that you use, in the, I have my way of doing my agriculture. The greater society has its own way of doing agriculture, and they're both pretty much opposite, right? Our Oklahoma people had their way back in times of making their canoes and living on that water, being on that. Is it the same as what the settler people are doing today? So when we look and reflect back and forth over these things, I think it's important that we always think and put that at the back of our mind, that whatever it is we're doing, we have a responsibility to try to make it better and nicer. So I spend a lot of my time. We have all kinds of beautiful, beautiful seeds. I've rounded up many of them. I have, 15 or so indigenous seeds. Probably 8 or 10 of them are just our Haudenosaunee seeds. They're very, very beautiful. Their colors, the variations. They're not just that white navy bean that's hard as a rock that you got to soak for 3 days before you can even cook it, right? And that's because, a manufacturer, a processor has just sucked everything bit of life out of that seed. That's why, when you use these kinds of seeds, you're so used to, 20 minutes, cooking it there, change the water, and then go again, right? They cook so much faster. It's not like this, waiting overnight for your beans to soak because our people haven't dried the heck out of it, and that's what's happened with them. But we have many beautiful kinds, different purposes, some for different foods and different things like that. I can't really say that I really have a real favorite of any, it doesn't matter what I'm growing, I do like growing flowers too, but it doesn't really matter what I'm growing. Like some gardeners are just like, I'm a tomato person. Like, right now I have, I think 18 varieties of tomatoes in my garden. Down from 24, so I'm happy. I'm getting it down. I'm going to get down to maybe anywhere between 8 to 12, right? So because there's such beauty in heritage tomatoes. The colors, there's blue, or there's black ones, and yellow, and orange, and red, and green striped ones, and purples. There's such variety in them. So how do you resist that? And they all taste so differently. And in today's foods and today's society, that's what we've lost. We've lost the variation. You keep buying the same 20 products, they say, over and over and over again, right? Eating the same thing. And, sugar and salt, if it doesn't have sugar and salt, you can't eat it, right? And my daughter Tanya is a chef, an indigenous chef, and she cooks with a lot of foods that I've, grown, and she's learned how to cook them. And she's taken it up a step because she is a chef, And that's one of the things she talks to people about is, if, when you can't just go revert back to an indigenous diet because your body has withdrawals, just like a drug. So she says the sugar withdrawal, the salt withdrawal, she says you go through that. So you might eat an indigenous lunch, but then you have to stop at McDonald's and grab a milkshake or something on your way home because she says, even though you may be full, your addiction hasn't been fed. So you have to feed that. So she says you have to realize that when you're going through that. She says that's why it's very difficult for people to say, "Oh, I want to go to a total indigenous diet." Well, it's a thought process, so that's important. One of the things that I have been working on that was kind of neat, and I just actually came to fruition this year. One of my cousins came over and he wanted some strawberries, right? Some plants. So he knew I had some, so he came and gave me some strawberry plants. Comes back the next day with this breed of yellow corn. And I was really thankful to get it because I had it and then I let it go. I didn't take care of it, But I knew one of my cousins grows it all the time, so I just got to go and get it off him, right? Because it's a yellow and oil corn. It's a Haudenosaunee variety, but it's not really used a lot because we don't extract oil like we did in the old days of corn as much. But I was missing it because the Haudenosaunee have the white corn, right? The Tuscarora white corn with Six Nations variety being specific. It is different than the Tuscarora variety. Like it is, even though it's a both white corn and most people look at it as white corn, the size and shape of the cobs are different, the size and shape of the kernels are different. But that's what things, you don't really notice it unless you're like really into corn, right? So we have our white corns, and that's what I wanted, that yellow, because I wanted to have the red, the white, the black, and the yellow. I wanted to be able to represent the Haudenosaunee people and all the nations of the world in the four colors. So this one is a Haudenosaunee white corn. This is just a Mohawk red flower corn. This is an oil corn. It's a yellow corn. It's a Haudenosaunee variety, and it's a family lineage corn. So this is one of the ones that our family brought from the valley. When in the late 1800s, they wanted to produce a white corn. Well, they wanted to produce a corn sweet, as sweet as they could get, and they didn't want it to be white anymore. I don't know why. Because so when you first start to eat this corn, it is white, right? All corn is basically white, and after about 3 weeks after it starts to really develop its color, it's like one of the last genetic traits that it will get. So I don't know, I guess the settler people just couldn't relate to eating black corn. And it's just kind of a thing, because sometimes when you hand corn to kids, they're like, that's corn? Like they look and they don't recognize it, because the only thing they know is like peaches and cream or Seneca butter that they get from the grocery store. So sometimes they don't notice. So they miss the beauty of our Haudenosaunee corns. This is a very sweet corn. It's my favorite corn of eating because it is so sweet. It makes the best mush. We lye it just like, well, any corn you can lye, right? Depending on what you're doing, what you're making, what you're cooking. That's why we do it. But it's a really good corn for that, and it has enough sugar that when you're making mush, you don't really need to add sugar because it's a sweet floured mush anyways. Lying corn is just trying to break the exterior cultivar. You know, when you go, sometimes you poop corn and you get a whole kernel, it's because your body can't digest it, right? And that means you didn't chew your food 27 times like your mother told you. But so sometimes you get these full kernels that go past through. So sometimes we have to remove that depending on what we're making. So we just boil it in hardwood ashes. And it's critical. You'll see a lot of people, they do it in, like in the morning and they're done. And you have to let it sit in the ash water overnight. And the reason for that is because of the chemical reaction, right? It goes exponential, the amount of calcium and nutrients that are added, that are in here. But it only happens if you let this chemical reaction happen. And that happens. That's why your moms back in the old days, they put their thing on the wood stove, let it lie there, and just leave the top there, and then they wash it the next day. Today, everybody does it and washes it right away. So it's unfortunate because, you know, they're not getting all the nutrition. So that lying process just helps remove that outside of the corn. But even the red, we don't even use the wedding bread. Red, you don't even see the red. I haven't seen it like probably in 40 years, right? Since I was young. But this is made into a cornbread. The cornbread's supposed to be bread and it's supposed to have strawberries in it for the wedding ceremony. So it's very different. So a lot of the corns and a lot of the foods, and in any culture, they have, you're saying we're going to have a festive meal or something, and there's specific things that people, regardless, will still have. And it's like the first time when you go, oh, I'm going to France, or I'm going to Italy or something, right away you say, oh, I want to try, and you think right away in your mind, there's a certain food you just gotta have when you get there, right? I'm going to Mexico, I gotta have this. And you do that because that is the food that's associated with that nation of people and that land, and it's really important. It's part of who they are. So you want to, you visit another land, you want to really encompass that. And it's like that with the Haudenosaunee people. We have specific foods that are a part of us, and without having the basic ingredients, it's really, really, really hard to do seed ceremony with like crab dinner. And that's where I was getting to. Like, I went to seed ceremony, and about a good 95% of the people bought a package of seeds they bought at the grocery store. They bought, well, man, you know. So that's where we're at. So that's why I go back to what I first started with, is that we're in a critical state because people don't have access, and it's not that it's not there. They still exist in our communities. It's just that people haven't picked it up and continued with it. So this year, that was one of my big things. I gave away seeds to a little over 50 families. Instead of, I just shut my website down and everything I have, I just packaged up and I had a seed giveaway. And I provided 6 other Indigenous communities with major quantities of seeds so that they could start to, like, of everything. There was beans and squash, there was corn, there were flowers, pollinate, everything was in the package so that they could really get a nice traditional garden going. You know, and it's my hopes that, you know, those will, even if of those 50 families, even if 10 of them save that seed and grow it again the next year and keep it and start to bring it back, that'll be a big step, you know. The black corn, this one took 4 seasons of growing just till I got a basic quantity when I had enough to do about a quarter of an acre. And then I gave it all away. It was like 40 bushels of corn. Just to get it back into the territories, and I gave it to all the territories, and that's kind of what we want to do, is to get it going back into the other territories. And I was really still surprised, though, at this time during COVID and everything, people I know I'd given corn to, like, hey, you got any corn? You know, that's the first thing you're doing. So we have to be really careful and watch that, right? A seed is just like a human, right? It has a responsibility, and it has a natural inherent sense to grow. That's what it does. It knows how to do that. Not the GMO seed. It don't know how to grow, right? That's what was taken away from it. It does, you know, you got to spray it to make it germinate. You got to spray it to make it flower. You know, you have to spray all these times. So it lost that sense of itself and sense of Mother Nature being able to grow. Our seed has not lost that. It still retains it, and it retains, and it's slowly modifying itself so that it's gonna, you know, adapt to this climate change that we're going through, right? And that's really important because in terms of the scheme of the world, right, in terms of food security and food sovereignty, yes, we have a lot of food in the world. It's got to be moved around a little bit. It may not be in the right places, but the point is that, you know, we're within that 10-year window of not being any corn. And there's not going to be any corn because they can't genetically modify it anymore. Geneticists know that they're at the end of being able to do that. Before they tweak it one more time, it's not going to be even corn anymore, right? And that's what's happening to every kind of food or vegetable that we grow. So we have to be conscious. And the United Nations, that's one of the big things that it tells every country, you should have a program to work with your Indigenous people, to go back to and figure out how they grew it. How come theirs is so tasty and how come it's this or it's that, right? Because that's where, to keep everybody in food, we have to think about that and go back to those seeds that are good and strong and healthy, just to keep everybody that way. They do predict, you know, within about 12 years, well, even now, 85% of the world will be fed by Indigenous people. 85% is a lot of percentage of the world. And the majority of that 85% will be women, right? Because in a lot of our war-torn, so to speak, countries, it is with huge populations all through, you know, Africa, all the way across through, you know, the Arabic nations, all those places over there, and it's women who are still in the villages, the small villages that are growing the food and they're keeping their people going. So they have to keep that process. And the ones that have kept their own seeds, they're okay. The ones that, you know, there's, you know, some countries in the world have the highest rates of suicide among farmers because as soon as they lose their traditional seed, because the company comes in and brings them new seed, oh, use this, and well, it's free for a while, you know, until they slowly lose all the real seeds, right? And then they're growing this, and then the price starts to jack up, then they can't afford it, and, you know, so that's why you have some of the highest rates of suicide among farmers because of that very fact. So we have lots of, Haudenosaunee corn is very distinct. It has that 8 row of corn, and that makes it really unique in terms of the world of corn. The varieties, I say, we have the basic colors, but we have just about everything. Even these are all, like all the colors are what we call our Hecawas corn. I couldn't find it over there. So we have varieties that have bluishes and whites in them, but we also have varieties that have reds in them, right? And some that have black and white. Like I actually breed them sometimes. I'll pick them out and just trying to get them like that. So, but it's really it's neat to have that. But and it's important for us to understand that as an Indigenous people, our contribution to the world was corn. It was one of those things. We look at Asian people and we think about the rice, right? And you think about how rice grows. Well, it's a very labor-intensive thing, right? And we think of the society of the Asian people. They're very much labor-driven, right? They just put their head down. They can work really. They're really great workers, right? We think of the Western people. Well, their contribution was wheat, so you just cast it and it grows. So it's kind of like an easy thing to grow, right? But when you think about corn, this is it's called a wampum variety, and you can see each one of the kernels has a husk on it, and then the whole cob has a husk. So this is genetically much older than these, because you can just see. So this back here was the original grass seed. That this had to be genetically, right, selectively bred to get to this, and then they keep and then you get to more of like one of these ones you can still see at the top. There's a few little husks on it. This is a popcorn, right? Then you're getting there with none of it on. So you can see the selective breeding and the working until you get. And then they started tinkering with the colors and then the flavors and what we wear and all that stuff. So there's it took a lot of knowledge for Indigenous people to be able to create what we have today. And it's not something we want to lose, right? It's we want to keep it going. And I guess one of the things that we ask the outside world, I want everybody in town to grow my seeds. You know what I mean? Like it's not something that I think that we own, or that we should say like all children in the world should have good food. So when somebody says, "What are you giving it to that white man for?" And I said, "Well, because he's probably hungry, and he needs to have good food because his children need good food too." And that's what's important to be as a society. We have to, reconciliation kind of comes with the settler people acknowledging the fact that they can't always live the way they lived before because they've gone to a different land. They have to acknowledge what's here. What's the bounty of the land? How do they respect it and how do they work with it? So that means, to me, you should eat some of it too, because it has to be. This is part of my DNA, right? This is our DNA because our creation story tells us that, and that's really, so that's how much our people think of our seeds, right? Because it has a place in our very existence. How we came into the earth and how it sprouted from the body of the sky woman. So that's really important to us to understand that. So when we work along that too, with our settler friends, we have to, we're hoping that they respect that and they start to integrate. Because at the end of the day, it's to their benefit, right? To have everything that, this land has to offer. So just in summary, I guess my final words is just enjoy your paddles, and I hope you have a good year this year. I know it's a little bit different, but as I say, just next time you're on that canoe and you're thinking, you're sitting there, you're nice and quiet, think about what I do to give back. Because that's your responsibility, give back to that water that you're enjoying so much. So now I'll go